Hi there, this is Dennis Velco with OutBüro. Thank you so much for coming back and joining us for another episode of OutBüro Voices, where we have engaging conversations with LGBTQ entrepreneurs, professionals, and community leaders from around the world. And today we are joined by Alfred Verhoeven. He is from Amsterdam and is currently working on his Ph.D. in marketing. That's going to be interesting to talk about why and how and everything that he got to that point. So welcome to the show, Alfred.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
Oh, well, wonderful. Again, I appreciate you taking the time out of your day in probably chilly Amsterdam. I have been to Amsterdam a couple of times, although it's been many years. But luckily was always in the spring and the fall.
Well, the summer is present as well, and we had a real winter this year for the first time in years. We could skate on the canals, which is always a rustic sight. But we went from minus 14 centigrade to plus 14 this weekend in just 1 week, which is quite unusual.
Oh, wow.
There's no more ice or snow now. There were piles of snow outside, but not anymore. Winter is pleasant, though, in Amsterdam as well.
Oh, okay. Well, I have lived in Europe and Northeast United States and the Midwest here for many years of my life. Vast majority of my life I've spent in the northern regions. And I'm sorry, I love being in southern Florida. I grew up in Florida, in central Florida, near Tampa and Orlando. A lot of people know those cities. And yeah. I just can't do outside of a short visit. I just can't do the cold and the snow. Just not me. I've had enough of it. Alfred, you talk us through a little bit of your background. You're obviously in the marketing space, correct? Or is the degree kind of a new venture? Give us a little bit of insight into your background.
Okay, well, yes, I'm in marketing, but I was trained as a lawyer. I have a law degree. Which I took out of interest more than out of a ambition to become a lawyer or anything legal. It's a very interesting study. I finished it in 1985 at Leiden University, that's the oldest university in the Netherlands. But right after that, I went to the army, which was then still compulsory, and I started as a management trainee in marketing and sales, which was coincidental, more or less. I didn't know what to do with a law degree that would, not be legal. So I happened to stumble into marketing and sales, 1987. And I've been in there ever since. And I started being self-employed about 20 years ago. Before that, I was employed by ING Group, the big financial group mostly. So I've been self-employed for 21 years now as a marketing consultant, interim manager, freelancer. And in between, I've taken a sabbatical to start my PhD called Marketing the Rainbow. It's almost self-explanatory, but I will talk about it later in a bit more detail. And that was 2009. And since then, I've been working on that research. And I'm now in the final phases. And my professor and I agree that we will run it off this year. So it's the horizon is in sight, let's say.
Well, wonderful. And so, did I hear you say, like, from the, and I do get the concept of the compulsory, military, but was it that kind of pulled you into the marketing, or was just after that stint in the military?
It was after my army training was. I was drafted, as young men were at the time, and it was interesting because I was in military intelligence, which is not so much secret as it was at the time, and I was an interrogator of prisoners of war in Russian, so I learned Russian in the army, having spent already a semester in Moscow before then, so I had a view of both sides of the Iron Curtain before it disappeared.
Oh, wow.
And that was interesting for me, and the most interesting way to spend I had 22 months in the army. I could have also been digging holes and running with trees on my back, but I preferred to study a language, which was very useful and interesting. So it didn't change my career perspective because it was just an additional skill that I acquired, Russian.
Mm-hmm.
And after my army days, I just was looking for a job, and management trainees were normally recruited from any university graduate, could be economics or law or a language, and then trained inside the company to be, well, manager of sorts. And I was drafted by ING as a management trainee, and ING gave me the training into marketing and sales.
Yes. Well, and you said that was the mid to late 80s?
Say it again, sorry.
That was the mid to late 80s?
It was 87. Okay. And I spent 10 years in the group. I had two different companies that I worked for, and I quickly found out that marketing and sales cannot really be taught. Sales, you can't teach sales. Sales is an acquired skill that you cannot really be taught. And marketing you can learn about, but if you don't have the hang for it, it's also difficult to be taught. You have to have certain qualities, to be successfully performing in both marketing and sales. And I happened to fall in the right place, and I was happily doing so for 10, 12 years before I started being self-employed in that same field.
I guess I would probably restate that, is that, any skill can be learned. I mean, a lot of selling is going through making sure you're saying, if you've never been taught on the proper things to say, to close a deal, that just doesn't come through magic, right? Having a mentor and a coach you through that, someone can learn those skills. That doesn't mean they're going to be the world's greatest salesperson, but marketing is more of an art, where it's kind of, and I would use that analogy, you can take painting lessons after painting lessons after painting lessons, or drawing lessons after drawing lessons. But if you just don't have that kind of innate ability and interest, the likelihood of being, good enough, for example, to sell your paintings is probably slim. You might be enough to give away to your friends and family or force upon them. But yeah, marketing is much more of an art and part science, bringing in psychology, bringing in color theory, what kind of colors influence people and why. And a lot of that's also cultural. And of course, fonts. What do people think about a font, a sans serif versus a modern block? And, how does that make them feel? And, some of that psychology, it's subjective, it's test, it's so many different things. Well, very interesting, though. We have a slight little bit of a connection. I also was in the military, served in Germany, which is where my German skills. I learned German, not in the military as part of my job, but because I was living there, and my first boyfriend was German, Uwe, and we lived off base. I still had to maintain a military, quarters, a military. Yeah, part of the room that was designated for me. My bed, my dresser, my trunk, or the wall unit to hang my military clothing in. But I actually lived off base the vast majority of the 3 years that I was in the military, while also in Germany. And because we dated for about 2.5 years, and but he did import export, so he always wanted to speak English. So at home, even with him, we always spoke English. But I always felt like, all right, I'm in Germany, therefore I need to speak German. I need to learn it. So every time I would go to the cafes, go to the coffee shops and so forth, I spoke as much German as I could. Then after my time in the military, I stayed in Europe, in Germany, and went from a smaller town called Aschaffenburg, which is south of Frankfurt, moved to Frankfurt and helped open up the very first technology call-in support center. But my tie-in there was one, military, two, language skills while in the military, which although I'm rusty, ich spreche Deutsch, also ich kann auf Deutsch überreden. I can speak and I can have a small conversation in German still. Would love to rekindle that. But my second boyfriend of 9 years was in the U.S. Army whenever we first met and was in counterintelligence. And his dealio, there's a book actually written about our relationship because he was in counterintelligence, this time late 80s, early 90s, and was dealing with that same people from that same country, from Russia, who were in Frankfurt. So it was like really interesting. I could actually do probably a whole segment on that era. Again, there's actually a book written about it because we went through him being gay and then the Russians there noticing. I had to learn counterintelligence maneuvers. So still today, if you
maneuvers for that are there?
Pardon?
There are maneuvers for that, are there?
Oh well, yeah. I mean, if you believe you're being followed, I mean, it's more difficult to do. But if you're in a city like Frankfurt, like Amsterdam or something, I had to learn how to spot people, and because they were following us. I mean, no kidding. We were watching. Do you remember the movie called Hunt for Red October? If folks out there, if you haven't seen it, it's a great old movie. Yes, you mentioned you saw it. But if you in the audience, viewers and listeners, if you haven't seen it, if you have, put in the comments down below and let me know, and maybe share one of your favorite Cold War spy espionage movies. Maybe if I haven't seen it, we'll check it out. But we were actually sitting in a very small theater in Frankfurt, Germany, which was just on the other side of the Russian tourist agency. Mm-hmm. I forget what it was called, but people would notoriously go into the tourist. Yes, in tourist. This. They would go into it and come out on the other side of town. And
that's a counterintelligence maneuver if you're speaking of it. So
yeah. So while we were sitting watching this movie, one of the head people for them in Frankfurt, he and his wife were sitting 3 rows behind us to the right. And Chris, during one of the early things, happened to turn around and he goes, "Oh my God, there's so-and-so." And I'm like, who again? And he said his name. I'm like, oh, he's like the second in command, right? He's like, yes. He and his wife, said her name, are 3 rows behind us. And I said, oh, well, that's quite interesting. This is like the second week of this movie being out. It wasn't like it was the first couple of days, right? And so after the movie, they left just before the movie ended. Then when we left, we were going off to go have dinner. And then lo and behold, who's at the same place? And he's like, oh, this isn't coincidence. And I'm like, yeah, but they're very obvious, right? So let's just not worry about it. And he's like, yeah, well, Dennis, 2 guys going to the movies and then out to steak dinner together seems kind of, well, at any rate, so that's when he started training me. And so one of the, if you're ever out there and you want to lose a trick, right? The guy keeps following you, whatever, doesn't have to be espionage. This is what you do. If you are in a major, a metro area where you have these things, the key point is if you think you're being followed for whatever reason, 3 modes of transportation. that's how you definitely lose someone. So because one, they know they're going to be made, they know they're going to be spotted. Okay. And, but it's also safety. So one, get yourself into a crowd, get yourself, if you're on a side street, obviously get to somewhere where there's more people. So, so you're walking, look back frequently, let them know you see them. Then they're going to go, they're going to leave. Okay. If you don't do that, jump on a bus, jump on a taxi or an Uber or whatever, jump on a subway. The point is 3 modes of transportation, because there is no way that serendipity would have them by chance on the same 3 modes of transportation, ending and resulting in the same place. Like those people who followed us was, was it by chance they were in the same theater? Yes. Was it by chance they were in the same restaurant? Maybe it was in the area. It was a nice restaurant, but there's no way they would be at the third. So at any rate, sorry. Again, the name of the book is where a chapter it is called. It's by a good friend called Stephen Zeeland, Zeeland, and the book is called Barracks Buddies and Soldier Lovers, and it's I forget what chapter it is. I think it's chapter 3. He changed our names to Randy and Robbie to protect the innocent. Yeah. So anywho, so sorry. I have stories of Amsterdam too, but I won't go down that path right now. So you did numerous years now. So you're focusing on your PhD in marketing, and you talked about marketing the rainbow. And yes. So talk a little bit about what was your desire, out of, going into the PhD? What are you hoping to achieve with that in your focus?
There were 2 reasons I started it in 2009. The first was that 3 of my friends just got their PhD in 3 totally different fields of expertise. And it was an interesting ceremony and quite an achievement to reach that phase. So I was in admiration of those 3 friends. And then 2 of my clients, both large telecom companies, T-Mobile, the German one, and KPN, the Dutch one, they both asked me at different points in time, how can we reach the gay consumer? Because I was openly gay, and they wanted to know from me how they could reach the gay consumer. So I said, why? Like you, I like to ask why. And they said, well, because they are rich and they have a higher income and they are trendsetters and they live a luxury lifestyle. And it's like, I didn't recognize that. And I didn't think it was true. So at that point, I decided to make it a subject and research it in more depth as a PhD. It was difficult to find a promoter, a professor who could assist me, because nobody had done this subject before. And although it was marketing, it was also sociology about, minority marketing and sexual identity, and there was political things were involved, marriage equality and everything. So
one thing I'll interject for you to know where that stereotype of the dual income, no kids, wealthy, gay person comes from. So I'll link below as well the interview that I did with Todd Evans of Rivendale Media.
I know Todd.
Awesome guy. So in that interview, he talks about because Rivendale is one of the oldest, longest running marketing companies. They sell all the advertising for 95% of all LGBT media in the US and Canada. And so, and the person who started it, was doing marketing for Elton John's first American tour. So it's 42 years old. So we'll link down below. If not, search for it. on YouTube or on your audio app, or just come to outbureau.com under episodes and search Todd Evans and Rivendale Media. So in that dialogue, what they did is to first convince or to go after for marketing, because that's what they were selling the advertising for, LGBT media. They wanted to know, every advertiser wanted to know, well, what's your demographics? So what they did is their first ever study was looking at the major publications. So the major publication in New York, Chicago, and in Washington and San Francisco, who were their biggest, who were their biggest newspapers and magazines at the time, and what was their demographics. So when people cite that study, which has been perpetuated over and over and over and over again, that's not all gays, and it's not all gay media, not all gay websites, not all gay publications. It was just those 4 or 5 at that time. And so it's just been something that people like to they've heard, it gets perpetuated, and they don't know the backstory of. So for you and your future and for your customers, that's where that came from. And it unfortunately does, because of it's not their fault. It's not, Rivendale Media's fault. It's the people who take that, and then because LGBT media around the world then started utilizing that same demographic persona as if it was their own, but it's not, right? Because the LGBT media in Cologne or Berlin or London or Manchester or even Amsterdam is going to be different. And even when you're looking at media within even those cities like New York, no, not all LGBT people, even in New York City, are rich, wealthy, and have a lot of extra income. There's a lot of poor people and so forth. But it was just those particular media brands. And it's like those who get the National Geographics and the New York Times. If you read those 2 publications, you are likely this demographic. Well, that's not the same demographic if you pick up your local newspaper in Miami. So anywho, just wanted you to know that, and wanted our audience to know that, and especially those in the marketing. Don't cite those studies. If you do your own, damn it.
It's a very good point which I came across when I wanted to find resources to back up my story, and I found these research agencies respected like Rivendale and some others that were blowing up the figures of the total disposable income of LGBT in the United States or anywhere to incredible figures, because it was in their interest that it would be as big as possible, because then everybody wanted to take part of it but didn't know how, and would come to them to help them find those customers. And I just wrote an article called The Myth of Gay Affluence, inspired by Lee Badgett, a respected scholar in this field. And she has written about this in the 80s already, that the assumption that gays are rich and affluent and trendy and, that is all myths, because you also have the homeless LGBT youth, and you have the pink seniors who have no pension or no income to spend. And if research agencies, and including sources like New York Times, have quoted incorrect figures that have been quoted and cited and used by the World Bank and by the Supreme Court of the United States, to the detriment of the community, because they were blown out of proportion for commercial reasons, and at the same time abused by others. For instance, Scalia, the judge on the Supreme Court, who died 3-4 years ago, he quoted the figures of gay affluence and said, that Colorado had the right to deny rights to the LGBT because they had a disproportionate political power and wealth. So it even reached the Supreme Court. And I tried to filter out the results from dubious researchers to the more reliable ones. And Bob Wittek, I presume you know him, a friend of mine. He's a very respected and well-established researcher and scholar for the last 30 years in this field. He has placed these things into perspective. And where some agencies use the 10% rule that Alfred Kinsey defined in the 40s and 50s of last century, they say 10% of the population is LGBT, the average income is this, so the total income that they have to spend is 10% times this. Disregarding the fact that it's not 10%, but more like 4, 5, 6%, and that the income is not higher than average because gay males make a lower income than straight males.
Yes.
And you just mentioned double income, no kids, the famous DINK abbreviation. My clients did not use DINK because they didn't look at the no kids, they looked at double income. And in fact, gay and lesbian households have a higher percentage of being single households than double households compared to the straight population. But the no kids thing is actually the key to the secret to my whole PhD. People who have no children have more money to spend on themselves and more time to spend it. However, it doesn't mean that you need to be gay or lesbian to fall into this category, because straight people without children are also interesting as a group. But they cannot be found because there is no website for childless straight couples, and no skating clubs, and no gay games or straight without children games. They cannot be found. Whereas the LGBT is so organized into so many groups and associations and friendly societies and events that they can be reached. So they became a more interesting target group with the lack of children. Also, lack of children is 80% or more in LGBT households, and it's only 20% in straight households. So also there's a big difference.
I will also interject for you, just in case you've not thought of it, is one of the people you should also reach out to on OutBüro and in the group on LinkedIn. His name is Andy Kramer.
Okay.
With a C. He has an app for caregivers, and disproportionately, they have a high number of people who self-identify as LGBT. And so people with the no kids also often become the de facto caregiver of an ill or elderly family member, because the people with kids, then they have their kids to tend to, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So and being the caregiver of someone, there's many times it affects their jobs. Sometimes they lose their jobs, and there's many factors that I think that would be a really great connection for you. And so also a plug for him is if you know of anyone out there in our listening audience, if you yourself or know anyone out there who is a caregiver, especially in these current times of COVID, caring for children at home. I'm an adoptive parent myself, or let us know down in the let us know down in the comments. Are you a caregiver at home caring for family members or your kids? Do you need a little bit of help? If so, also check out Andy Kramer's app. I'll put a link to that as well. It's a great anonymous resource. But I thought from a marketing perspective, is also thinking about those people might be interesting to put in your data set that you're building. Another group that I think you'll want to possibly, if you've not connected with, is Scott Seitz of SPI Media, SPI Marketing. His name is Scott Seitz, SEITZ. I actually have to get his second interview out, but already have one out with him. They do a lot of actual studies as well. So I think it'd be great for your work.
Well, most information has been assembled for my thesis. I have about 700 pages of text, which will be condensed down to about 250 because it will be too much if it's more than that. So I've taken out all the case studies and the examples and made them into separate articles like the ones I showed you before. I just published one on Heineken beer earlier this week. So I have my information. I'm now streamlining my thesis down to the core of 200 to 250 pages because my professor has also written a book called Doing the Right Thing, which is about corporate responsibility. And actually, when I write an article about some company like Chevrolet or Budweiser or Heineken doing marketing the rainbow, they are quite foul, like, yeah, but it's pinkwashing. They just want our money. It's not true. And even though I can prove, in my article that they are considering the community and they are, linked to a charity, and it's not just for pride that they do something. Pinkwashing is an accusation that's easily flung around when a company, a mainstream company, tries to approach the LGBT customers. So doing the right thing is the reason why they do it. Diversity in all respects, including gender and race and ability or disability, has been moving up on the list of priorities for many companies in the last 10 to 15 years. And one good example is Starbucks. There was a general meeting of shareholders like 4 or 5 years ago where this, let's say, rebellious shareholder, who's probably from the American Family Association or the 1 Million Moms group, if that says something to you, the religious right, let's boycott them, all groupings. And this guy stood up during the general meeting of shareholders at Starbucks and asked the CEO, you are hanging the rainbow flag on your main office during Pride, and you are giving attention to LGBT employees and customers. I don't like that. You should be focusing on your business, making coffee. And then the CEO historically said, sir, with due respect, this is our core business, and diversity is what we are. And you made 35% profit on your shares last year. If you don't like that, go somewhere else. And he got a standing ovation from the rest of the audience. So this one rebel shareholder with his bigoted views was mowed down by the CEO with good arguments saying, we do our business, we do it well, you make money, and in the meantime, we are diverse and inclusive. It doesn't exclude each other. So mind your own business. That's what he didn't say, but he meant. And he said, go somewhere else if you don't like it.
Well, and to back that up, is study after study demonstrate, and even economic books have been written about focusing, when companies do focus on diversity and inclusion and creating a welcoming space, it actually has the opportunity to increase their bottom line by up to and around 30 to 35%. So all of those gains that right-wing shareholder received could possibly, based on studies, be directly attributed to the corporation focusing on diversity and inclusion. So very interesting.
There's danger of backlash. If 1 million moms cries foul and says that everyone should boycott Walmart for the transgender bathroom discussion, it always backfires. It's always beneficial for the company when those people want to have a boycott. But it could also, it was perceived 20 years ago as not done to, use an LGBT protagonist in your commercial. There shouldn't be a gay couple or lesbian person in there because it was not done. After 2015 and the SCOTUS verdict on same-sex marriage, this has totally changed, and not just in the States, but all over the world, because the floodgate opened like, okay, now we have achieved this. It has been approved by the highest legal institution in the world, let's say, not counting the not NGOs in The Hague. And so it's okay, and it's not just okay, it's also good to do it, and we should do it. And since 2015, many companies have trodden this path, and is not just doing the right thing, it's doing the best thing. And like you say, it improves bottom line, directly attributed to being diverse and inclusive, because when your employees are happy and themselves in all respects, they're more productive, they have less sick leave, they will stay with the company longer. So you have much less expenses on human resources and a higher productivity. And then that's the first step. And then you can translate it to your marketing communication activities in the same way. And 10 years ago, when I found a commercial that featured LGBT, and mainly thanks to Mike Wilkie, whom you might know of what was then called Commercial Closet and now called Ad Respect. He has a whole file of thousands of print adverts and commercials featuring LGBT. 10 years ago, when another was found, it was like, oh, we found another LGBT commercial, look at this. And now on a daily basis, literally on a daily basis, people are sending me new materials of this company or the other. Like yesterday, Mike mailed me the new Chevrolet commercial that they made in collaboration with Disney, where there is a gay couple driving in one of the cars. So it's a daily event now. The Super Bowl has numerous commercials that are LGBT rainbow colored. So it's almost mainstream now, and you're foolish not to do it, because I mean, Marriott, the CEO just passed away, Arne Sorensen. He was an LGBT ally. And he said, this is what Marriott was founded by a really religious family, the Marriott family, but still they found in their hearts that it was good to be diverse and inclusive 10, 15 years ago, in spite of their religious background. The same for JCPenney's, who had Ellen DeGeneres as a spokesperson. 1 million moms said you shouldn't have because she's lesbian, she's a bad role model. And JCPenney's, originally also a Christian conservative family-founded company, said this is what we want to do and we will keep on doing it because it's good. So I see the trend now, it's accelerating, and we see more and more companies and more commercials, and not just around Pride Month. Of course, that's the most logical time to do it. But throughout the year, fashion collections by Tommy Hilfiger and Adidas and other sports and fashion companies. It's run of the mill, and it's good that it happens. And still people say pinkwashing, which is too easy. But it's luckily much more normal now than it was even 5 years ago, let alone 10, 15 years ago.
Right. Well, on pinkwashing, just 2 years ago, there was a study that was done that showed that about 40% of the companies who rainbowified their logo didn't even have LGBT inclusive benefits for their employees. So that's pinkwashing.
That's pinkwashing.
Yeah. Now, and frankly, it's very hard to find LGBT inclusive marketing examples. So that's why I love what you're doing, because you're making it more accessible. You're writing articles about it. You're showing the history and the context. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to have, whenever I started seeing what you were doing, why I reached back out to you. I think we had touched base like a year or 2 or 3 ago. And then when I saw some of your recent postings, I was like, oh, that's great. Because it does show, because, if you as an employee or if you as a job seeker, if you are trying to look for a new job, and you can't necessarily go based on what indexes have, because it's self-reported and, blah, blah, blah. But, let's say you're looking for a job. And so if studies show that 57% of qualified candidates will click away if they don't see that the company has strong policies and truly inclusive environments. 57% of qualified candidates. So
that's the millennial influence, because that's the most tolerant generation that we've ever had. And they are also very important for marketing, but also for HR reasons. Exactly what you're saying. They look at the company's HR policy, they don't see diversity and inclusion, say, well, then I don't want to work there. And
Absolutely.
My husband is CFO of a care facility, and he's openly gay. I mean, we've been together for 34 years, and he started that 20 years ago. So for him, it's normal, and for his colleagues as well. So I asked him, why don't you participate in Pride with your company? He said, well, it shouldn't be my initiative. And then 2 years ago, the personnel organization in the company said, shouldn't we participate in Pride? This question I asked for years. And she said, well, if you want to, let's. It's mainly to show people, both potential staff as well as present staff, but also their clients, their patients, that you can be yourself at this company. And for any company, not being non-profit, it's very expensive to participate in a Pride parade, because you may know that we have our parade on the canals. So it's on boats, on little floats. Our floats really float. But it's very expensive to participate. Let's say a company like IBM or Netflix, they pay 50,000 euros just to enter, if they are allowed to, if they have a good story about their desire to participate. It wasn't that expensive for my husband's company, but still it was expensive to participate, hire a boat, dress it up, and everything else.
Right.
So they did it, and they presented themselves to Amsterdam and the world, and we have about 400,000 visitors to Pride every year. You can come to us both as a patient and as a staff member, because we are open, diverse, and you can be yourself. And that was the important message, even though they are not LGBT owned or operated, and they don't really have competition as a care facility. They just wanted to make this statement. So future staff would say, okay, I can go there because I can be myself.
Right, right. And and you could let him know, I challenge his previous thought on that, it should be someone else's view. Well, no, you're the CEO. And when staff see and people see LGBT people in positions of management and authority, it makes them feel more comfortable. So it's great that he was out, and that already created a welcoming environment. But I mean, I could see why he wanted someone else that he possibly didn't want to be like, oh, well, I don't want to be like, just because I'm gay, I don't want it to be, everything's gay. I can get that. But so it's good that others did. But had I been talking with him however many years ago, I would have been pressuring him hard.
Well, I appreciate what you're saying, but you should place this into Dutch perspective, because we have a very open society. I mean, we were the first to legalize same-sex marriage in 2001, first in the world. And, we've had legislation, the Constitution will change shortly to include LGBT, especially on Article 1 of the Constitution. So for centuries, it's all been open and accepting of many refugees and other kinds of people, from the French Huguenots to the Portuguese Jews. And everything is, as a matter of factly, nobody really pays attention to you being different, or you're being gay, or you being Moroccan, or you being from Indonesia. It's one big melting pot of society. So it was we never needed to make a point, really, because it was already done in the 70s. So for him as a CFO to propose for his non-gay company to participate in an expensive event that, because he was gay, wouldn't really contribute to, well, I wouldn't say his reliability, but it wasn't his call to make. He wanted to be an initiative from his employees, and they did it without him even pushing for it. So
yeah, I mean, I can see and understand that, and evolution happens in all ways, so that's great. Well, cool. So So you mentioned for your thesis, marketing the rainbow, you're going from like 700 and you're striving to get it down to 2. And so you're taking some of the content in and around each company and creating individual articles.
Yes.
And so is there do you have like a website where's your main place of distributing those or putting those up?
Very much so. It's called marketingtherainbow.info. And there's a few chapters there, and one is called case studies. And on the case studies, there is like fast-moving consumer goods, there's cars, there's home, there's about 10 categories. And I think a total about 100 case studies that most are very recent, because the last 6 months I've been devoting my time almost exclusively to this research. So I've written Ralph Lauren, Tommy Hilfiger, Sky Vodka, a number of them in the last 2 months or so.
Wow.
So they're up to date as to their recent activities. My professors just suggested I should cut off my research in 2015 because of the flood of new material that was on the market. So my research itself, 250 pages, I want to boil it down to, will look at history. And you said yourself it was difficult to find good examples from before 10 years ago, but I go back to the 50s of last century. And then the first steps in the 90s as to TV commercials, and it progresses from there. But after 2015, when I had already assembled most of my materials, it's just too much. And I take it into account, and I make the articles up to date with the developments of the last 6 years, but they're not in my thesis as such. So I've taken out most of the case. I have some insight to give, like Absolute Vodka is for me the champion of gay marketing. So they're in my thesis itself to see what they've done since the 70s to support the LGBT community. And like American Airlines is in there, I think, but most of them are taken out and separated onto my website. So that's where you can find them.
Okay, wonderful. And sure, you have to have some stopping point, especially with so much data, which is great. And I do like, that have already started thinking about, how to take this, especially with so much content, and how to do something bigger and beyond. Yeah. And actually make something from your thesis, not just achieve the doctorate degree, but actually have a working product, an example, and I think it's great doing that documentation and historically putting into context. You're doing a service to the companies because
they appreciate my reviews, my articles, the reason I publish it is, first of all, it stands in the middle of society. Everybody sees it or knows it, and everyone I spoke to, from my managers at the telecom companies to specialists, to everyone said, that's very interesting, but I don't know what's going on. So I will tell you what's going on if you tell me your story. So I assembled all those stories into this research and made it into a readable story for the case studies, the articles, and the more scientific approach with footnotes and source mentionings in the thesis itself. The three people that did their PhD, who inspired me to do mine, wrote their stories about. One was about erectile dysfunctions, very known to many people before, especially after Viagra. One was about the communications done in healthcare. People don't really know what's going on. And the third was artificial insemination of people who have difficulty conceiving. So those are interesting, but not to everyone. And I think what I'm writing about is something everyone sees: television commercials, print advertisements, websites, and I place them into perspective. And I try to make it readable for everyone, not just, from a hoity-toity scientific point of view. but for to make it interesting with lots of visuals, because I have many commercials, videos, clips, and also lots of print advertisement. So it's very visual and colorful, because the rainbow comes back a lot of times, and your background is some sort of rainbow. It's very colorful and bright, and people like that. So it's yeah. So it's a colorful, actual thing that people recognize and know about. Of course, they have their opinions about it as well, and I have to explain myself a lot of times all over again about why a company is doing this and why I am doing this for a company. Are you being paid by Heineken to write about them? No, I'm not being paid. It's my update on what they have been doing. It's not, a product placement of sorts. So it's no, it doesn't make me any money. It's just interesting to find an audience who appreciates the output I give.
Right. Well, and from it, going for a PhD and having this kind of information, what obviously can lead to money is having the vast knowledge. And therefore, as companies are wanting to have a consultant who understands historical context and progression, you're in a great place like no one else to be that paid consultant to come in and help their marketing department to get the message right. Because I imagine there has been some major mistakes along the way.
Many mistakes. Amazingly stupid mistakes and insulting mistakes, and the Heineken article I just mentioned starts with their what we call gay vague or gay tease commercials from the 90s, where they use gay stereotypes to make fun of and to make them ridiculous and to laugh instead of using them as valued consumers. So that's called gay vague or gay tease, and they progress to a very valid point of view and a good marketing strategy. But there have been many mistakes, even by the big brands, who, like Doritos. Doritos thought they were funny by making user-generated content for the Super Bowl for a number of years, and every year there are gay themes used in the user-generated content. Not always funny, and sometimes insulting, and they haven't used many of them. I think I have 7 or 8 examples on my website. And then a few years ago, Doritos, which of course is PepsiCo Lay's, they decided to better their lives, and they are cooperating with a number of charities like It Gets Better, and they have now the theme Pride All Year. So they don't only link into Pride events or the International Day Against Homophobia, but they have a Pride All Year concept. So all year long they have LGBT themed commercials. And in fact, in December, Mexico, Doritos Mexico launched a beautiful lifestyle clip of 2 minutes where you see only Doritos 4 seconds in the beginning of the video. That is about a coming out story that really happened, where the father goes to Reddit to find advice on how to talk to his son about this. And this little clip from Doritos, who always made these stupid, insulting clips in the past, but now made a beautiful lifestyle clip, they got 14 million views in 2 weeks' time.
Wow.
And I found English subtitles, because it's in Spanish, and I placed it on my YouTube channel, and I got 200,000 views. That's the highest I got for any of my 1,000 commercials. Lots of discussion, always positive. And interestingly, at the same time, I published a Cadbury commercial that was from January this year. Cadbury, the chocolate brand, They have this cream egg, which is too sweet. Your teeth start falling apart when you look at the eggs. 50 years of cream egg. They made a commercial called the Golden Googly, very funny. And in the 1 minute of the commercial, there's like 7 seconds where there's 2 men twirling around and then biting in one egg, each at one side, like a lady in a vagabond with spaghetti, that kind of scene. Their lips barely touch, but it created an outcry of hate and disgust in England. And again, from 1 million moms in the United States who don't even see this commercial because it isn't shown there, who want to punish Cadbury for pushing the gay agenda down their throat, which is a term often used. So whereas the Doritos commercial generated a lot of praise and positive reviews, and their like-dislike ratio is 25-1. The Cadbury commercial is because it's a sexual activity that you almost kiss. They say it was over-sexualized. You should have a look at it. It's really not over-sexualized. And their like-dislike ratio is 1-1. And I've never ever seen it before. And it has 100,000 views on my channel, and I have 1,400 likes and 1,400 dislikes, which is amazing. And I had to report about 250 people to YouTube for hate speech. I mean, Sodom and Gomorrah was there a number of times, and Bible quotes that I would go to hell, and people wishing I got cancer for posting this. It was just amazing, the load of filth coming out of the
and talk about trying to push something down your throat. I grew up in a very right-wing religious family, and I'm 52 years old, and every chance he gets, he pushes religion down my throat, quoting Bible scripture just because I say the word community, literally. So it's like, who's doing what? No, you're the community who's constantly trying to push things down your throat. You're the community who has tried to push laws and legislation to force people to live away in your dogmatic religious belief systems that you don't even know, right? I mean, so that's a whole topic.
The religious conservatives who always claim the right to religion, the right to freedom of, they don't realize that the United States has a constitutional separation of state and church. So
that's very thin.
Well, if any president ever forgets to end his speech with "God bless America," he's chastised. And
exactly,
Obama forgot it once in 8 years' time, and he never heard the end of it. That shouldn't be allowed. I mean, in God we trust, it says on the banknotes. Why? There's, it's a state thing, money. It's not a religious thing.
Yeah,
it's mostly those religious, the rich people who are vile about anything LGBT. In the Cadbury case, it was also people who thought that because chocolate is a children's product. I disagree, but anyway, you shouldn't use a sexualized way of eating it. It's like, it wasn't sexualized. It was just two men who ate one egg. I wouldn't share my egg, but then again, I wouldn't eat this cream thing. But it was amazing how much hate was generated by that one commercial. While at the very same time, the Mexican ones, and you would think Mexico is more conservative than the UK, was generating so much praise instead. So interesting.
Right. Yeah. Well, I look forward to you also sharing those not only in the LinkedIn group, but on outbureau.com. We do have groups for marketing. Would love for you to be participate in those.
Yes.
It's growing. And as well, would love to follow on with conversations and get your feedback, because on outbureau.com, the employer listing is an employer branding. I call that section of the OutBureau an employer branding platform. And there they're able to list what they do for their marketing campaigns, and employers can actually upload examples of their marketing material to demonstrate that they are inclusive and actively marketing in there. So would love your feedback.
Yeah.
Well, we've had a very active conversation, and I look forward to folks participating. Check out his website and put a link or a comments below of what your favorite commercial is. Or can you think of those in the audience? Can you think of an LGBT related commercial that you just love? If so, go out, if you would please, and link to it in the comments below on whatever app that you're on, and we'll make sure that it's that company has that he's done an article on it and have included it, and just include those for fun, whether they're great, romantic, maybe one of those
Disgusting, maybe.
Disgusting, inappropriate. We'd love for you to share your favorite or your most hated or your most funny LGBT related commercial from a company. We would greatly appreciate that. And while you are looking at that, also please join OutBüro at outburo.com and start your professional profile and engage in conversation there today. We'd appreciate seeing you on the site, the professional and entrepreneurial focused community. All right. Well, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure chatting with you, and I look forward to staying in touch and seeing where you're going with all of this.
It was my pleasure, and you will definitely be hearing from me very shortly.
Awesome. Awesome. And again, thank you everyone for staying tuned to this very interesting episode. Reward yourself and be sure that you're notified of future releases of episodes as they become available. Be sure to hit that subscribe or follow button on whichever website or application that you are listening to this to. Again, please come join us at outburo.com, outburo.com. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.